Tell us the story of the Posner family, Purdue, their $600 million fine, more about the opioid crisis and the bankruptcy court.
So I think that actually is the Sackler family. Posner is me, and I'm the person who have been investigating it. But Steve there, I think, was thinking he got his families mixed up. But the Sackler family, which is, some people may have heard of the Sackler family. If you followed at all the opioid crisis, you'll know it. They are the private owners of a company called Purdue Pharma. Purdue's blockbuster. It was a one drug hit company. You know, you hear about one band hits. They had one band hit and it was on the charts for a year, and then we never hear of that band again. That's almost Purdue. Their hit blockbuster was called OxyContin, came out in '96, and through 2018, the last year for which there are full numbers, sold about $35 billion in sales, much of it by sort of what I call mismarketing and fraudulent marketing and deceptive marketing by the company, marketing for everything from backaches to things that it never was really approved for by the FDA, lax oversight by the FDA, all types of greed from the distributors in this, the big drug distributors like Cardinal and AmerisourceBergen, problems with the chain pharmacies like Walgreens and others who are encouraging their pharmacists to write more prescriptions for it. So there are all types of people to blame. But the Sackler family in particular, the owners of Purdue, became billionaires from this. And they were put on the Forbes richest families list in 2015, estimated to be worth $14 billion. Almost all of it from OxyContin. In my book, I cover the Sacklers actually from the early 60s, because it turns out a Senate investigation had called them a Sackler empire decades ago. But that's because they had made an antibiotic the number one selling drug in America by marketing. They made Valium the number one selling drug in America for 15 years. It held that title. So they were in the drug business doing things in terms of marketing aggressively to Americans years before they had their addictive painkiller in terms of OxyContin. But the trail of devastation and death left by them is astonishing. And now Purdue, the company, has filed bankruptcy protection. The Sacklers aren't bankrupt, but they're trying to contribute several billion dollars to an overall settlement. If they're able to do that, they will walk away from this entire process without any other lawsuits, with no criminal prosecution. They'll still have billions of dollars. And that, unfortunately, is one of the saddest and worst stories in the history of American drug industry.
What has been the response from Pharma about your book?
I don't think anybody in a pharmaceutical firm boardroom has been jumping up and down for joy at the publication of this book for two reasons. They tried to ignore it for the most part, but there's also no question this was a difficult book for them to deal with, because I try, as I say, to not only be even-handed to the extent you can, but I'm very, very hard and critical of them in the long run. But in addition, the book is 750 pages long, but 250 pages are source notes. So if somebody looks at it at Merck or Pfizer or Johnson & Johnson, says, we don't like that book, and they don't like what I say about them in a particular paragraph, they get to go back and see what it's from. And it's not a secondhand piece of information. I'm going back to original sources here. I'm going back to their own company documents that have been produced in lawsuits. I went through literally hundreds of those lawsuits. I had freedom of information files that filled up 15 different file cabinets inside our small apartment in Miami. We had trouble walking through at one point to get to the kitchen. And so I build up what I call a documentary case. And this documentary case is not one that they like. I also had something I noticed that was interesting. This is my 13th book. Trisha is also an author, my wife, she's done 2. In those 15 books in the last 40 years, I've been on a lot of national shows. Some of them, often I get to go on again when I have a new book out. But this time, I didn't get any of the Sunday morning programs. I didn't get CBS This Morning. I didn't get the Today Show. I didn't get the evening news and some of the cable programs. And why? Very interesting footnote I put in the book about them. 70% of the revenue from their advertisements come from drug companies. You look at many of those news shows that appeal to an older audience, those from 55 and up, and they are advertising all the time, everything from erectile dysfunction to menopause to new cancer treatments. And so it goes down the line. They don't necessarily want somebody else on the program telling you how greedy and terrible these very firms are that are paying the bills of those shows. So that was unfortunate. I think I did get a little bit of a boycott, but it was very, very what I call subtly done. Nobody, did a tweet from Pfizer that said, "Don't put them on."
What categories are the biggest money makers for the pharmaceutical industry?
Without any doubt, the biggest money makers are the drugs you have to take every day. So that's what they're looking for. There are categories of drugs called orphan drugs, and those are really for rare neurological diseases. They're very expensive and they're very profitable for the companies. But if you're talking what I call bread and butter drugs, the drugs that they're looking for to develop, they want to develop something for what they call chronic diseases. So they don't like antibiotics because you don't take them for that long. You take antibiotics for 7 days or 5 days or 3 days, and then that's the end of the treatment. And in addition, if you develop a new antibiotic today, you spend all the money on developing it. The doctors are not supposed to give you or dispense the latest and newest antibiotic because they're worried about antibiotic resistance, because they had prescribed so many antibiotics since the 1950s and on for everything from sniffles to a cough to a cold when there was no need for it, that we've created this amazing resistance. They put it into our food supply. They have it in terms of what comes out to us from animals and from farming products. All that antibiotics has meant resistance. You come out with a new antibiotic, you don't want to prescribe it right away. So drug companies say, so why should we spend the money coming out with a new antibiotic that's given for only 5 or 7 days or maybe 3 days, and it's not even prescribed that often? And instead, let's develop drugs for diabetes. Let's develop drugs for heart disease. Let's develop drugs for cholesterol and high cholesterol, and make sure that those are the drugs that go out all the time. Let's put out drugs for a whole growing list of psychiatric features, because every time there's a new, sort of Bible for the psychiatric industry of what diseases are, new ones are added in on what's called the DSM, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual. So now we have PTSD that can be treated. Now we have anxiety disorder that can be treated, clinical depression that obviously can be treated, variations of bipolar disease. Those are pills you have to take every day for the rest of your life. They love those types of pills.